Awesome, Nick, man. I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it.
We've already established you're a podcast veteran, so shouldn't have to take much to break the ice here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's exciting to be here. I always love talking to new audiences. We've got we've got a good audience right now, but it's always good to expand out into other people that are interested in similar activities, right? I think your audience is probably a ton of bow hunters, I imagine. Do you feel like you touch outside of that?
We definitely jump into the fitness realm of things. Definitely bow hunting, hunting in general. And with the variety of guests I have on, man, you just never really know where it's gonna go. I have a lot of like former military guys that jump on, but we never really touch on like tactical training, which is why I thought this podcast would be fun. I don't know exactly the direction I want to go with it yet, but it'll be a good time. I want to shout out Nick Palacios. He's a really good friend of mine. It's crazy because we've never met in person, but he's been on the pod a couple times, like way back in the day, and he's recommended some really good people for this show, and I don't see this one being any different. So awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, Nikki's an incredible dude and has been an awesome addition to our team. Been very glad to have him and lucky to have him on board.
Yeah, he's a go-getter, man. He's a grinder.
So you talked about tactical fitness and just tactical in general. It's funny because it's in our name, but like, what does it really mean, right? Like,
Exactly.
what does tactical mean? People ask me what the tactical games is, and if you go online and find forums and this isn't tactical and blah 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 blah. I mean, to me, what we have is a fitness and firearm sport, right? Like you're going out there, we're going to test as many different modalities of fitness as we can that are reasonable, that have an equitable standard, meaning if you and I do it, we're going to be doing the exact same thing, right? We're going to be getting the thing from point A to point B or over or under, getting our bodies through space, running the same distance. The idea is to make it the same for every competitor that comes through our sport for that event. Um, Outside of that, like tactical is just your ability to utilize the things that you have to make the best decisions to move forward in the best way, right? So like preparation allows for performance when it comes to game time. So what we encourage is our athletes to go out there and get interested in fitness, get interested in shooting in other shooting sports, even if it's hunting, if it's bow hunting, your draw, your pull, your breath work, everything that you do, your trigger release, everything that you do, it transfers over to shooting a firearm. I'm not going to say it's no different. There's a ton of nuances and differences, but there's definitely commonality between the two. And that's why I think Nick, who came with zero firearms experience, adapted so quickly into being proficient with firearms because he'd spent so much time working on the mechanics of shooting a bow. And obviously the health and wellness side of it, when it came to the physical work, he was very well prepared for that. Probably more in his head than he was actually, especially for like the endurance stuff, right? Like Legacy Nick was a bodybuilder, and now we're getting him into more, functional fitness, as we would call it. A lot of people compare us to CrossFit. I think that's a misnomer. Like a lot of people believe CrossFit is something different than what it actually is, right? Like every time you get on a rower, are you doing CrossFit? Right? Like that's what does a rowing machine mean you're doing CrossFit, or does moving while you're exercising mean you're doing CrossFit? I think to a lot of people, that's what they think it is. If they step outside of like a 5-3-1 program where they're just doing strength, they're doing the big four lifts, like now you're officially doing CrossFit, which is, if people are out getting fit, that's all I really care about. What title you put on it, what label you put on it, that doesn't really matter so much to me. So like I don't know, how familiar do you think your audience is with the tactical game? Should we get into that and explaining that a little bit?
I'm sure the majority of them have heard of it.
Okay.
Like speaking for myself, I know what it is, but I haven't really dove like crazy deep into it. I just know that Nick does it. I know a couple people that I follow are starting to get into it. I'm seeing a lot more of it, which obviously is probably exciting for you and your team, but I mean, it's definitely growing, I can tell. And yeah, why don't we just kind of start maybe from the beginning and then how this all came about because it's very unique. I don't see anything else like it, and it's extremely intriguing.
Yeah, that's cool. And I actually I love to talk about the history of it because it kind of started in a cool place. So the guy that started it, his name's Tim. Tim was a Green Beret Army veteran. I think he spent 26 years in the Army and 23 years in Special Forces. After he got out, he ended up being Greg Glassman's private security. So Greg Glassman's the founder of CrossFit, and in that he got introduced to functional fitness. Um, Through that route, he ended up starting what was called the Tactical Athlete Games, which is a terrible name for a sport. It would have been tag, which is kind of funny, like tack. But yeah, so we started the Tactical Athlete Games. I think the first event had like 17 people at it. It was really just like go out there, have fun. Let's see what we can turn this into. And it evolved. It evolved over years. And as good as Tim was at coming up with ideas, he was not as great at running a business. So when it came time for the actual sport to take it to the next level, the previous owner, Jared Halbert, took it over. So he took it over in 2021. So I started out in the sport as a competitor. I was living in New Orleans at the time. I was working in the defense industry after I got out of the military. I loved my job. I loved what I did, but I also loved fitness. So I started coaching a couple days a week in a CrossFit affiliate, and through that, started a nonprofit. Through the nonprofit, got introduced at we were doing a firefighters for SWAT workout to benefit a couple different veterans or organizations that are adjacent to the firefighters and to the SWAT team. And the winning team got the lion's share of the donation sent to their nonprofit. But during this event, I was introduced to the tactical games, and I the next competition was coming up was in Meridian, Mississippi. It was 2 weeks later. I bought a rifle, I bought a pistol, and I went out and I competed in the first event that was 2 weeks later. I had an absolute blast. I showed up. The fitness side of the house at that time, where I was competing in like the lowest, I say the lowest, the lightest division, which was intermediate, was incredibly easy. I was blowing through the stages, but I wasn't winning. I mean, I was, when I say I was kicking the shit out of people, I mean it. Like I was beating people. My time would be 6 minutes. Their time would be 12 minutes if they even finished. But I was never doing well. I was never performing well. And it was because shooting matters so much. I was shooting so poorly that it didn't matter how much better my fitness was than the rest of the field. I was getting beat by guys that were moving much more slowly than me, but performing very well on the firing line. That year, there were 9 competitions across the US. I traveled to 7 of them and competed in 7 of them. I fell in love with the sport, the people in it, everything about it. So during that time, the tactical games was growing and starting to catch notoriety. I think at that time, maybe they were at like 20,000 Instagram followers. And it like at the end of that year, it was at 40,000, right? Like that was really where it started to grow. And then the next year was 2021. I got asked to help out with some marketing. So I came on board. I used to bother the old owner all the time, just like, hey, let me help out. I just want to be a part of it. I just want to figure out something that I can do to benefit this because I really love it and I believe in it. So he asked me to help out with marketing. And in that year, we went from 40,000 to like 80,000. So again, it was another doubling up on the followers, interest. We really started to catch on way more competitors, where we were in the 80 to 120 range. We were taking it from the 120 to 160 or 180 range. 2022 was another year of the same. We added additional competitions. I think we did 12 that year. We expanded into a couple other avenues of like long range shooting and two-gun shooting, so less fitness and more just pure firearm shooting. And in 2023, the old owner of the sport was ready to retire. He had been, he's 2 young kids. I think they're 13 and 10 now. He was just ready to retire. And so him and I had a conversation, and I was in a position where I was able to buy the sport. So I took it over and became the owner about a year and a half ago. And this year have seen just exponential growth in the company, where we used to have 180 competitors. This year now we're up to 320 competitors at our events. So we found a way to double our capacity. We used to sell out at 180, but because of the interest, we needed to find a way to kind of adapt and grow and get more competitors out there. So now we'll have 11 events total this year, 12 with our sniper challenge and our national championship. and the average competitor base is about 220, with the last two of the year having 300 plus competitors. So a lot of people, a lot of interest. We put these events on all over the country. We put on training seminars all over the country. Anything that we can do to get people interested in health and wellness and interested in shooting. Both of those things, like a lot of our competitors come with a fitness background and an interest in firearms. And now we're starting to pull competitors with firearm background that are more interested in like, hey, I need to get fit, not only for like, to go and do this competition, but for life, like it doesn't matter if you can shoot your ass off all day long, you're an incredible marksman, but you can't run a mile, you're a liability, right? Like you're just, if you're, everybody likes to talk about like post-apocalyptic stuff. If you're on any kind of medication, as soon as that supply chain gets shut down, you become an instant liability. So it doesn't matter what you've stockpiled, what you've grown, what you've done. If you can't take care of yourself physically, you're just definitely a liability in my opinion.
What I like so much about it is, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you got quiet a little bit, but
Okay, copy that. One second. Test, test. All right, I think we're
good.
good.
There you go. Yeah.
Awesome. What I like so much about it is you're combining two perishable skills, right? If you're not practicing quite frequently with firearms, you're going to lose that skill. If you're not consistently working on your health and wellness, you're going to lose that skill. And by combining these two things together, they can both essentially save your life. So that is probably my favorite aspect of just the brand as a whole. And, me being somewhat new to it, obviously, like I told you, I've heard about it, I've seen it around, I've never competed in it. My background, I'm LEO, so like it's kind of right down my alley, and I can see myself getting involved at some point. So I love how you're combining the two.
Yeah, it's there's something that you touched on that people tend to take, whenever it involves firearms and fitness, it tends to take, I don't want to say a negative, but the idea is preparedness, right? I need to be prepared for this end state. I look at it a little bit differently. I I exercise because I never want to have to say no to something. When opportunities present themselves, right? Like it's there's a 12-mile hike at Grand Teton, and I want to go on that 12-mile hike. I want to make sure that I don't, without question, I know I can just go and do that. I had a friend that approached me at our national championship in 2022 about going and doing a 50-mile ruck 2 days later. Or I mean, 2 weeks later. I don't ruck, right? I had never, at that point in time, the longest I'd ever run was maybe 12 miles. Um, and I knew that I had at least enough fitness to go out and show up and test myself in something like that. So for me, combining the two allows me to just like when an opportunity presents itself, I can go and do it. When the marksmanship stuff presents itself, there's matches around here all the time. And I'm sure if people aren't familiar with firearms, there's a ton of different ways that you can go out and shoot. If you don't like fitness, you can go shoot USPSA, which is just handgun only, or you can shoot two gun, which is rifle and pistol, or you can go and shoot PRS, which is just long range rifle. And a lot of these they don't involve any of the fitness aspect other than just moving your body through space and shooting in different positions and kind of testing where you're at on that side of things. The ability and the fundamentals allow you to go in and at least do it. Are you going to be the best there? No, hell no. There's people that have been practicing at this for decades, but you can go out and you can have fun, you can enjoy yourself, and you can at least give it a go. And that's really why I started into this modality of fitness instead of just doing bodybuilding or doing powerlifting. I found this expanded my horizon and capabilities that allowed me to go and like if there's an elk hunt and I need to go, ruck in 6 miles and then I need to, pull whatever my harvest out, I'm capable of doing that. And I know that because I've built a foundation of fitness that allows me to do it.
I wrote this down, man. I love this, what you said. You said you exercise because you never want to say no to something.
Yeah.
So I'm an online trainer and I tell, like, that's a message that I try to preach. Like, this is exactly why I do this shit. And in turn, why I'm making you guys do this shit. Because can you,
Yeah.
can you imagine seeing an elk over the ridge at, 0.25 or half a mile and you got to get there and try to beat that thing to the spot? But you're like, fuck, dude, there's no way I even have a remote chance, let alone if I do get there, I'm done. Like, I might as well just lay down. I'm like, can you guys fucking imagine that? Like, what are you doing out there if you're not physically capable of making a push at it, man? I love
Yeah.
how you said that. It's so important. Do you mind kind of just let's drive that home for the audience because I mean, fuck, dude, it's spot on. Can you just dive a little bit deeper?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's one of my favorite things about what we get to do is we travel all over the country for the tactical games, right? We put events on. This year will be our 11 events will be in 10 different states. Um, when you go out and you experience these things, like especially if you go out west or go up into the northeast, it's mountainous. There's terrain. There's all these beautiful national parks that like people in America don't even go and experience for whatever reason. But go out to one of those parks, and Grand Teton, just an example of one that we did in October last year. Go hike Grand Teton, or go over to like Kauai or Hawaii and go and hike Angel's Landing is in Utah, but there's the name of the one in Hawaii on Oahu escapes me. But there's these incredible natural features, even if you're not on a hunt, just to go and experience. And then if you do get the opportunity to go on a hunt, going out there and having the physical capability to go and go track, to go and like experience what the wilderness actually is. That's so incredibly important, and it's something that like children need to see. They need to have an understanding. It becomes a family effort where you're bringing your kids out there and you're involving them in it, and showing them what this country is. And fitness opens a lot of those doors. Health and wellness opens a lot of those doors. And also, like the dad that's tired at the end of the day, or the mom that's tired at the end of the workday, like there's a reason that your body is shutting down, and it's not because you didn't, because you went to work that day, regardless of how physically demanding your job is. It's because you're not preparing your body to take on that fatigue. So how do you do that? You exercise, you eat well, you hydrate, like all of the things that are so important that come along with taking a serious approach, or it's a serious putting a serious effort into health and wellness. And it's so funny, like it's as simple as just drinking water every day. Something that I'd be curious to see how many Americans actually drink the appropriate amount of water every day, and how different they would feel. I think so many
Not a
people in like
lot, brother.
it's Greg Glassman talked a lot about like, and I take it back to CrossFit because there was a lot of things that he said that I think that were very, very smart. But like, people are unwell. A majority of people in this country are unwell, and they don't even realize it. They eat garbage, they drink like shit, they drink alcohol constantly. Like, I'm not here to talk about I don't think people should drink. Like, do I drink? Every once in a while, a couple times a year, I go out there and I do it. It was a definitely something that I overindulged in at a younger age, but something now that I realize, like, waking up hungover Saturday morning means I can't do what I want to do on Saturday. It inhibits something that I'm going to do over the weekend, and it's just not worth it for me. I think there's so much life to live out there that I don't need to like find reprieve in a bottle. I don't need to find like I'll go to a wedding and I'll have a couple cocktails, or I'll go out to dinner and I'll have some wine, but it's just not. So many people focus so much on that, and then they'll say, well, I can't afford a gym membership. It's like, well, how much money did you spend on beer this month? Like,
Yep.
and I came from a military background, where like you came from an LEO background. It is so ingrained in the culture. Drinking is so ingrained in the culture. When I was in the military, smoking was ingrained in the culture too. Like, you didn't meet an old master chief that didn't smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, like cowboy killers, and like everybody went out and you started drinking as soon as you hit port. That's just what it was. um, and it's a relaxation effort, but I think you can kick up the same endorphins, find the same enjoyment, and benefit yourself by putting that emphasis on health and wellness, and less on just alcohol, or just trying to find that um, immediate reprieve from whatever stress you're dealing with.
I'm happy you brought up alcohol and drinking because I've touched on it a little bit on here, not a ton, but like I always say, like I can afford, and I'm not talking financially when I say afford, I can afford to go out and have a good night. Like just
Yeah,
go out and send it with the boys, go get rowdy with the wife, whatever. I can't afford missing that next day of not doing shit.
yeah,
Does that make sense? Like that next day when you're just feeling like shit, you're sluggish, completely unmotivated.
yeah,
I can't afford to do that. I can afford to have a good time for one night. And if I could pick back up where I left off the next day, sure, I'd probably do it a lot more. But
yeah,
I can't. And then it's one of those things as well where like for me personally, I don't feel like it, I know it. I have so much momentum right now. And I don't want to do anything to hinder that.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I'm sure that's another reason why you don't really drink at all. It's just because you got goals, you got missions, you got things to do, but you're looking where you're taking this company. I mean, I think you said you went from 180-ish to like 300 competitors. That's a big swing.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
big
yeah,
swing. You got this momentum and you need to ride that wave.
yeah, for sure. And it's there's I can't tell you how many times I heard it growing up. There's nothing good that happens after midnight, right?
Dude,
Like
me too.
how many
Yep.
times how many times have you gone out and there's that point where the night's going to go one of two ways, and it's like
Mhm.
usually midnight's that cut up or it just goes the opposite way. I've been lucky enough in my life, and I say lucky because there's definitely been situations that I put myself in because of drinking, because of whatever I might have gotten into, that like the needle could have swung one or two ways. And in almost every case, it went in my favor. But shit, man, it's one misstep and it could have gone that other way, and who the hell knows where my life would have been. So now in my head, what I'm trying to do is limit the opportunities where something like that, some outside influence could cause issues in my life or in my success that I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah. Very well said. Obviously, you're the face of this brand, and we're talking about the brand, but I want to maybe give the listener a little bit more background on you. This question's for me. Where at in Michigan are you from?
So I grew up in St. Clair Shores, which is like two cities north of Detroit. So it's Detroit, Grosse Pointe, and St. Clair Shores, moving up on the St. Clair River. But I lived downtown. I kind of spent a good bit of most of my time was in St. Clair Shores and then in Detroit.
I asked that because I'm from just outside of Ann Arbor.
Oh, nice. Hell yeah. Oh, dude, I spent a lot of time in Ann Arbor. I'm a Michigan fan through and through. I was born during the Michigan State game. Like I've been
No
bleeding
shit.
maize and blue since I was a little kid. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hell yeah. And then you went to the military, right?
I did. Yeah. I was a total fuck up growing up. I mean, I was a little chubby, degenerate kid that just like didn't have any motivation. I grew up with a single mom who did everything that she could to raise me as best as she could. She was focused on working to make sure that she could provide, and in that, I took every opportunity to do whatever the hell I wanted to do. And I was a terrible little kid. I got in trouble a lot and I did a lot of stupid shit. I graduated high school by like the skin of my teeth. I was a perfect C student the entire time, like just making it through as well as I could. Um, and I went to college. I went to JC, like a community college, and I my first semester I took, or I'm sorry, my first year I took 6 classes total, and I came out with 3 credits. And
Good grief,
it
bro.
was it was an eye-opening experience for me because what
Yeah.
I did, I knew every bartender in Detroit. I knew, like, I had connections everywhere, so I would go out and I would party. That's all I cared about was partying. I had a job that gave me enough money that I could go out and I could drink. I could do the things I wanted to do. I could pay my rent. I'd moved out about 2 weeks after graduation with my best friend living downtown, and we had the just like it wasn't a frat house, but it was as close as you could get to a frat house without being in a fraternity. Um, we had a great time and did a lot of fun stuff, but I also, like, I was going down a pretty dark path and definitely abusing alcohol pretty bad. So I went over to my dad's house one day and I had a conversation with my father, who was I didn't grow up with, but who I reconnected with later on in life. And he was like, "You, what do you think about that?" And it was a Coast Guard ship was riding by. I was like, I don't know, I don't know. So I went to the Marine recruiter. I went to the Coast Guard recruiter. The Marine recruiter called me every single day. It was like, because I got a pretty decent score on my ASVAB. I was like in the 90s. So that, he's like, you can be a helicopter pilot. You can do whatever you want to do. So I went into the Coast Guard recruiter, and the Coast Guard recruiter was basically like, man, if you want to be in my service, we'd love to have you. But if you have any hesitations, we don't want you here. And that was kind of how I knew that I wanted to go and try that thing. So I signed up thinking I was never going to actually do it. Like it was basically, we'll say it was July, and he's like, all right, your ship date's going to be in September. And I'm like, okay, I can keep pushing this back, at least it'll get people off my back for the time. And I walked out of the recruiting office, went home and told everybody. And he called me the next day and he was like, hey, we had a slot open up next week where you'll ship next Tuesday. And I was like, fuck it, man, let's just do it. And I did it and I left. And it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It gave me structure. It gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me my first major win. The first thing that I ever worked at and actually achieved, which was a huge thing for me, which was a huge motivator. And really changed the trajectory of my life. Because had I continued on the path that I was going on, I was going to end up in jail or in a morgue. I don't doubt either one of those two things. Changed the trajectory of my life. Went into the service. I ended up in an MOS that, like, in a rate where I did nerd stuff. I worked on electronics. Like, I had no idea what I was doing, but there was a bonus for it. And at that time, it was like they were offering me money. I was going to take it. So again, I barely graduated A school, went out into the fleet and got put into a position where I had to work by myself. And working by myself meant, like, all of the units that I was supporting in the area that needed to be able to use their radio, that needed to be able to use their navigation systems, that needed to be able to use these assets in order to do their job, depended on me and my ability to do it. I was lucky enough that eventually I had some people come into that mess, or into that situation to help me out. But for a while, there was just me, and I continued on that career path. I always, when opportunities came up, I volunteered for them. When schools came up, I went to them. When anything came up, I was the first one to raise my hand, no matter what it was. And through that, I ended up on a pretty cool career path. I went to I started out in Cleveland, which, like, the Coast Guard has stations all over the place. So I went from Cleveland. I got stationed back in Detroit for a little bit. From Detroit, I got stationed at the Coast Guard Academy in the physics department. So I worked for a couple of years at the Coast Guard Academy in the physics department, helping PhDs with their research and helping classrooms. And it was cool. It was a really, really cool experience. I had a great time there. And then the final stop was in Miami. In Miami, I was working on the Coast Guard was receiving these brand new ships at the time called fast response cutters. They're really cool. They're designed for migrant interdiction and drug interdiction. Like, that's what they do. They go out there, they go really fast in pretty shitty water, and they have LE units that are on them that can just go out and respond to situations quickly. It's what they're using in the Gulf. It's what they're using down in Miami and Key West and Puerto Rico. They're really badass little ships. So I started taking reception of those when they would come in. I was working on them and helping the Coast Guard say, like, hey, here's the deficiencies, here are the problems, here's where we're seeing issues, and then reporting it back to the company that was building them. In that, I met the company that was building them. I met the company called L3 Harris. I met a couple of guys through that, and it turned out that they had a position that was opening up. So I was about tour complete. I'd been on my second extension. I'd never signed a second contract, and the opportunity opened up and I took it. So I left service and started in the defense industry and had an absolutely just killer career. I loved it. Traveled the world. I worked on some really, really cool stuff for a bunch of foreign and domestic militaries. And, L3 does a ton of really, really cool stuff from unmanned vessels to things up in space, to surface vessels, to submarines. And I had the opportunity to travel everywhere. I mean, I was in and out of Istanbul airport pretty often, serving a lot of things in Africa, and then back and forth to Australia all the time. I was in Hawaii and Alaska. I flew all over the place and got to see a lot of really cool shit. So I had a great time in that career. Got recruited by another shipbuilder to go and take over a program. When I went to this next program, I was responsible for a C5I suite and design of the next generation of Coast Guard ships. So I did, like, the nerdiest shit you could imagine, but it was like I was now managing a group of nerds. Like, I was the king nerd. And it was really cool. I got to do a lot of really cool stuff and meet cool people and interact with people that I wouldn't have been able to at just, like, being an enlisted dude in the military. So I was capable of helping the military in a much larger capacity, which is something that I always wanted to do. I wanted to be effective and be a helper there. And then the opportunity came up to work for Tactical Games full time. I knew that the sport needed it. I knew that in order to get to the place that we are now and to continue on the path that we are now, it needed full-time dedication. So I quit my job. I moved to Texas, and I took over working for it full time. And the opportunity presented itself to buy the company, and that's what I've been doing since.
I'm gonna try my best not to title this episode "The King Nerd." So just so you
No, you
know.
should. King of the nerds. That's they called us Twidgets when we were that was what we were affectionately called when I was in the Coast Guard. We were the Twidgets. But it was funny, like, my last unit in Miami, it just so happened that, like, this group. So when I went to A school to learn what I was doing, I'd shit you not, it would be Friday night, and I'd be like, all right, let's go out, let's go find something to do. And these dudes would be sitting in a room playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like it was no like computer gaming, all that shit. That's what they did. I was like, let's go out and get fucked up. They're like, no, let's stay in here and roll this 20-sided die. So like that's in general, that's what a lot of those guys were. And I went to my unit in Miami, and it just so turned out that like all the dudes there loved working out and loved playing sports. That were like all the nerds. We used to kick the shit out of all of the other units there when we would play sports, when we'd have intramural stuff. So we might have been nerds, but we were the biggest, toughest nerds that were out there.
Love that, dude. Side note, those Marine recruiters are consistent, aren't they?
So 2 years later, because I told the guy I was going to college and to
Hmm.
follow up with me, he called me 2 years later. I'd already made E5. Like it was I answered the phone. I was like, "Hey, this is Petty Officer Thayer," and he's like, "Oh, how's it going, Nick? Like you told me to check in with you and see how you're doing on college. Just wanted to see how it was going." I was like, "I'm pretty happy in my career here."
They did the
It got-
same shit. They did the same shit with me. I had already graduated the academy and had like 2 years on. They're like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm like in balls deep in the middle of my career right now. I'm good, thanks though. Like, please stop calling me. I appreciate the consistency in the phone calls, but damn, I'm good, man." So obviously, Nick, everybody sees you now, right? You married by chance?
Not married, got a fiance. I've been with the same girl for a very long time. We're coming up on 14 years this year.
So it might as well be. Okay, we'll call it. I think
Yeah.
what do they call those? Like
Domestic partnerships.
yeah, okay, yeah. I knew there was some sort of term for it after like a decade or something. They put a title on it, a weird one. But obviously, like clearly a successful business guy, military background. You have a very successful company that's growing and scaling, but it didn't always used to be like that, of
Right.
course. Um, Growing up, you kind of mentioned like you were either going to end up in jail or you're going to end up in a morgue. Was there a oh shit moment or an eye-opening moment when you're like, fuck, I'm either going to go left or I'm going to go right, but I need to make the right decision now or this is going to get really, really bad for me. Can you think of anything where you're just like, you just had that moment and you're like, fucking A, I got a
Oh
choice to
yeah.
make here?
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of them. But the one in particular, the reason that I went to the recruiter, I was out with a friend who I knew was doing some nefarious stuff. I wasn't involved in it. It was his business. It was what he was doing, but it was somebody that I at least liked hanging out with. He got pulled over by some unmarked cop cars, and they knew who he was, they knew what he was doing, and they were following him because of that. They pulled him over, and I'd been drinking too, and I was underage at the time, and they didn't ask me for my ID. They were clearly after him. Um,
Was he
they
running
pulled us
drugs or what was he
over.
doing?
Oh, he was selling drugs. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they pulled him over, and he basically pulled him out of the car and just read him his rights and arrested him right away. And I was like, hey, to keep his car from getting impounded, is it okay if I drive it? And they basically said, yeah, if you blow under the legal limit, you can drive it. And I blew like a 0.25. I don't know if you know how high that alcohol percentage is, but it's pretty gnarly.
It's
But in my
high.
head, I was sober. I was sober. Like I wasn't messed up. I was capable of driving. And they're like, no, you're walking, homie. So I was in downtown Detroit. We were near Hart Plaza. And I walked, if you know Detroit, I walked from Hart Plaza to Wayne State's campus, which is where my other buddy lived. So it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm walking, and I was just thinking about my life and the things that I had done, and I ended up the next morning going hanging out at my dad's place, and that was it. That was like, I need to get out of this. I need to stop being an idiot. Like I never sold drugs. I never went down that path, but I definitely had friends and acquaintances that were in that world that did those kind of things, and you know, it was eye opening for me, because you think when you're young, you think you're invincible. You think you know everything. You've got this head on your shoulders that's just like, I'm going the right way, or I'm doing these things regardless. I don't care how it ends up. And then you grow up a little bit, or something like that happens to you, and you realize like, oh shit, this is real life. Like I could be in jail, I could be in prison. I don't, and that's not a place that I wanted to be. And I think I realized that at that time.
Yeah. I think everybody kind of has one of those moments though. You know what I mean? Especially growing up like that. That's not a short walk either, brother.
About 3.5 miles. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
especially
wasn't
in
I
at that
wasn't
time of
doing
night.
fitness.
Um, So I'm gonna run something by you here. I haven't asked this question in a long, long time. I don't really have like set questions for this show. I you
Sure.
can kind of see how it goes. Um, but I feel like you're right there in terms of being able to give a good answer and being honest. Is there anything in your life right now that you know that you should be doing or that you're like putting off or putting on the back burner for whatever reason that it may be, like it's too hard or it's inconvenient, or is there somewhere that you know that you could be growing but for whatever reason you're just kind of throwing it on the back burner and just pushing it aside?
Dude, this is going to sound like the nerdiest shit. Reading. Man, I do not read enough right now. And it's like, I have the time, right? I'm dedicating time to social media or I'm dedicating time to other things, especially in the morning, late at night, whenever. Um, I know I'm not ingesting enough information from other people. Um, and again, it's like everybody thinks they know everything, like they're the first ones to ever do it, but there's so many good resources out there to learn from. And it's really been reading. The last book I read my friend Tulsi Gabbard's book, but
I've read that book too, brother. It's a good
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah, it's actually I've got one
Yeah.
right here. Yeah,
Yeah. You know Tulsi?
I do. Yeah, yeah, she's awesome.
Oh yeah.
She trains with me. She's a fucking beast, man. I would not challenge that woman to anything physically. She is a absolute beast.
I'm trying to
Um,
get her on the show and it's not looking good for me. I filled out her form on her website and I'm like, there's no way they're gonna see this.
but like that was the last book I read. And in that book, I learned things. And I know that there are all these great accounts. And, even when we're on the road, I do a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I become really into Sean Ryan lately. I think he's doing some really cool stuff and telling some cool stories. And
That's my favorite show.
is it really? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
so like I was always a huge fan of Rogan. Just because he gave people a platform to talk and to like kind of expand upon ideas, and regardless of who the people were, he always opened his doors and let them kind of talk through different things, which I thought was cool. Sean Ryan's had some really interesting guests on lately. That Tucker Carlson one was pretty cool. I liked his story because it was very real to me. It was
hmm,
very much like, here's what I did, here's what I was, and here's who I am now. Here's how I, kind of how I got there and why I made these changes. For me, that's like having come from, I don't want to say a similar background, but being a young dumb kid and learning from that, that's been a good one for me. So I would definitely say reading is the thing that I could be doing more of that I'm neglecting, and it's purely out of laziness.
that's one of those things where you have to be really intentional about it, right? You
Yeah.
you have to grab that book, you have to find somewhere quiet, and then you just have to do it. You'd
Yeah.
think it would be so easy, but it's not, man. Because like at night, I do the same thing. I try to at least read a little bit before bed because one, knowledge is power. Two, it gets me sleepy in order to fall asleep, right? Because sometimes I have a hard time shutting my brain off after working all day,
Yep.
and reading is a good way for me to just calm the fuck down and, in turn fall asleep.
Yep.
But yeah, you got to be really intentional with it because it's either one of two things. You're going to watch that show or you're going to pick up a book. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And there's too much good shit on television, right? Like,
I know, dude. It's bad. It's so bad. It's bad because like I'm on Netflix. I'm like, they don't have shit on here. And it's because I've like already seen everything. And I'm like, oh
you
my
already watched
God.
The Gentleman like six
Uh,
times. You can't watch it
Embarrassing.
anymore.
Embarrassing as hell, bro. Embarrassing as hell. Um, all right, man. As you can see, we're rolling. So this tactical games thing, I can see how it could be potentially pretty intimidating for somebody in
Yeah.
terms of like, hey, I work out a little bit. I've shot a couple guns in my life. This looks really cool. I've done some CrossFit, but how the hell do I even get started? Like, what do I do? Obviously, like physical fitness helps, being proficient with firearms helps, but what would you tell somebody that's kind of on the fence in terms of wanting to sign up for a comp and, just basic level skill sets?
Yeah, there's a lot of different avenues, and we've done our best because it can be intimidating. Firearms by themselves, if you're new to them, can be intimidating for sure. The fitness aspect for those that are new to it can be intimidating. So we've created a lot of different avenues and ways to get started. So skirmish is a big one. Skirmish is a local 1 day competition that's really geared towards getting people introduced to the sport of the tactical game. So they operate under the same rule set as us. The expectations are the same as far as safety and how the stages are managed and how the day is managed, but it's local. We've got, I think there's 8 of them now across the US that are, if not started already, that are getting started. So, a couple hours drive for most people. You show up and it's more small, right? There's 30 or 40 people out there. Maybe they've got 50 to 60, but it's less people. It's run by a person, a guy or a girl that has competed in the tactical games often, that's proficient in the sport, that understands well. We have a lot of LEO that actually run them. And it's really about getting them introduced to the sport. You go up with the gear that you have and you perform to the best of your ability. And they've always got extra gear around. That's another thing too, is people in this community are so willing to share because they want new people to come in. I can't tell you how many times I've loaned out my personal firearms, and I don't shoot like, I don't shoot cheap shit. It's not like I'm running a high point pistol, right? Like I shoot staccato, I shoot Hayes Customs. They're good things, but I'm happy to give them out because I want people to get the experience of what it's like to actually come out there and compete. So, skirmish is one opportunity. Volunteering is another. You come out and you dedicate that weekend to, hey, I'm serious about doing this. You get the opportunity to watch a couple hundred competitors go and actually do this sport, and you'll see every range because we have different divisions, right? A lot of people, what they see is like the elite division, which is the hardest, heaviest weights. You're doing more in that division. That's designed for people to really push themselves and see who is the best at the sport. We've got the tactical division, which for me is like the everyman division. That's designed for the law enforcement officer, the agent, the person that's in like that. I believe this is the baseline for what we should be capable of if you are filling this role in capacity. Then we've got our intermediate division, which is designed for people that are new. They're coming into the sport. Maybe they, don't have a ton of fitness background, or they don't have a ton of firearms experience. And then we have age divisions too. So for like masters 50 plus, we've got a lot of competitors that are aging over into the 60 plus category as well. I think the oldest competitor we've had out there was 73. And the youngest competitor we've had out there was 12. And it's cool to see like all these different age ranges. And if you're volunteering, you get to see all of it. You get to see the inefficiencies people have, or the efficiencies people have, where they're deficient. It gives you a really good eye, and it earns you a free slot to compete in an event. So every one of our volunteers that volunteer for 2 days get a free entry into a future competition. So it lowers the cost of entry. It gives you an opportunity to see everything that's happening. You get to interact with people that work for the sport. You get the real experience of what it's like to be out there and do it. So I think that, and then we have our athlete camps. So our athlete camps are like 3-day intensive. You come in and we'll take you from like the crawl phase to the walk phase. And if you're in the walk phase, from the walk phase to the run phase, we arm people with knowledge, with like here's what the best we know. Here's what the sport is. Here's how to operate a firearm. Here's how a firearm operates, right? Like how many people do you know that shoot bows that couldn't explain to you how a bow actually works? It's the same thing with a firearm. Explain people like the mechanics of how a firearm works really lowers that threshold of like uncomfortability, and it makes it like, oh, okay, I understand this thing now. I've got a baseline to work off of. So those 3 ways are really the best ways to start to get involved with the sport.
Perfect. That's a huge help. Thank you. What did I have here? So I'm big on community, man. And for example, one of my favorite communities I've ever been a part of is like the ultra marathon community. The
Yeah.
people are just salt of the earth. They would give you their shirt off their back. Everybody loves each other. Everybody's cheering for each other. There's something about suffering with another human side by side that really brings out that community. So here's your chance, man. I want you to talk about your tactical games community. What separates your community from maybe other communities, and just talk about the people that you've been able to meet and be involved with and just have seen their growth over the years.
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about with ultra, it's like trauma bonding. That's
Exactly, bro.
yeah. When
Exactly.
you experience hard things together, it you come out on the other side having a mutual experience. And a lot of people, they have commonality now because they've gone through similar things together. Uh, the reason that I came to the tactical games was because of the sport. The reason that I stuck around the tactical games is because of the community, the people that I met. We do have a lot of law enforcement, a lot of military, a lot of veterans, a lot of people a lot of doctors, ER physicians, a lot of just people that live a lifestyle that is atypical from like I work a 9 to 5. I know exactly what to expect at my job every day. I know exactly what my day, how my day is going to be structured. The people that are out there, they've seen stuff, they've done stuff, they've experienced life different than just the average human. And I can think of like Jay Hazlitt is a competitor of ours. She's a homicide detective in Florida. Um, like her day to day is dealing with death and terrible, terrible things. But when she comes out, she's got a smile on her face because she's around a bunch of other people that kind of understand what that life is like. One of our cadre, James Gill, was blown up in Iraq. He's missing an eye, missing a leg, but he goes out there and he gets after it and competes harder than most damn people do. Um, our community is filled with people like that, people that are out there that really want to do something hard and want to push themselves to be the best that they can possibly be, and that attracts a very different kind of individual than just like there's nothing wrong with pickleball, but like pickleball is something that like anybody can kind of just go and do. You can show up and you can have fun with it. Tactical games requires a level of dedication that shows a different character trait in people, and our community is bar none. I would put it up against just about anything. It's funny that you mentioned ultras. Do you know who Chad Wright is? You familiar with Chad Wright?
Yeah, he's on my hit list for the show.
So like they call him the White David Goggins, right? That's
Mhm.
how I've affectionately heard
Or
him.
the pale horse, whatever, depending on what day it is, right?
But so he came out and he competed in Florida this year, and that was one of the first things that he said afterwards was how awesome the community was and how welcoming and how and he comes from an ultra background, so I thought that was interesting that like there's commonality there. There's definitely, if you're willing to go out there and put yourself up against something like an ultra or something like a tactical games competition, um, you're a different breed, and you don't have to start there, right? Like 99% of the people that are in our competition in our community, they didn't start out with that, right? They caught a bug, they went out and they said yes to something, and it changed the trajectory of their lives. It changed who they were. It changed like the fiber of who they are, and now they are starting to push harder, to do more, to go further, to go harder. And those are the kind of people that I want to be around.
Likewise, exactly right, man. And it's cool because these people are that are on the fence or maybe don't have a ton of experience and they're not, Navy SEAL background or LEO background, whatever it may be. They're putting themselves out there, man. And that's good. That we need more people that are doing that because it could potentially make a huge impact in your life. And a lot of people are scared. A lot of people don't want to take chances. A lot of people don't want to take the freaking risks, and that's why they never grow.
Yeah,
So, if you're on the fence with something, especially like this, shit, man, even for me, like my background's really nothing to hold your head down about. I'd be a little bit nervous for sure showing up to a competition, man. Like there's some legitimate people out there. But I think with me, I would probably have to spin it in a way where like I don't care about that and I'm just kind of competing with myself. And I feel
yep.
like the majority of people that go into something like this, especially in the intermediate to middle stage of things, that's kind of the mindset that they need to have in order to go out and actually have fun and learn.
And that's where you're exactly right. That's where learning occurs. When it's me versus me, what am I capable of at this time? Like I prepared up to this point to get here. What can I do with what I've done to prepare? And then now, all right, I go out, I do it. What's my AAR? What am I taking back from it? How am I going to come back better and show up better next time? That approach to life is how you win. That approach to life is how you advance, how you grow, and that's everything, man. Like so many people are so set in their ways about what they do that there's no room for improvement because they know the best of what it is. um, there's a 99% chance somebody's done it better. I mean, there's almost a 100% chance somebody's done it better or somebody is doing it better. So learning from other people, advancing, growing, picking apart your performance, like that, people get uncomfortable with that. A lot of LEO, a lot of guys in the military, a lot of guys in tier one units specifically, they get uncomfortable with that because going out and getting beat by a 12-year-old girl is never something that's comfortable for you when you make your
Hmm.
living behind a gun. But it's a game, right? Like these people are out there playing games. They're not doing CQC or they're not like on a hostage rescue team. They're not going after serving warrants and busting down doors. They're out there to learn to become more proficient with firearms, to have something that's encouraging them in fitness. So there's it's learning is a two-way street. And I know a lot of people like that are in law enforcement, federal, local, state, that enjoy this sport because they can learn, because they can go out there and they can become more proficient in their firearms. It's, I think there used to be the term like, it'll get you killed in the streets, like competition will get you killed in the streets. I think that we've had enough law enforcement officers that serve in very high capacities at their units. They're SWAT team members, they're in charge of their training departments, that will tell you the complete opposite. Competition breeds excellence. And there is definitely takeaways that you can apply to your career if you do, if you're a first responder, an LEO or MIL.
Yeah, without question. I think it's a good wake up call for a lot of guys and or girls, right? There's always somebody better than you.
Yeah,
Always. You might
yeah,
think that you're the baddest, you know what, going. There's always somebody better than you. Same thing with Chad. Like I could almost lay money on that he wasn't the best one there.
yo, no, and he knew it, right? Because
Yep.
like preparing for an
That's
ultra
huge.
marathon is
That's
different.
huge.
Yeah, and he loved that, and like that's I hate to take from his podcast if you guys have the opportunity to go and listen to it, but that's what he said. He showed up because he didn't want to be the best at something when he got there, and what he found was like there are so many things that I can work at and so many takeaways from this sport. There was a guy that competed a couple of years ago, whose name I won't mention, but he was bitching about the fact that we had burpees and how are burpees tactical. And I love that Chad actually took that and was like, "Do you know what happens when you have incoming fire? You know what the first thing you do is you hit the fucking ground," right? Like, and I thought that was so interesting. Like that there's something about burpees and people hate them, right? Like people hate them or love them. Me, I personally like it's a character test because you can always fall down and you can always get back up. Like
I'm
there's
so glad you're bringing this up, dude.
no
I'm so
matter
glad.
how
I'm a
you are.
burpee guy, dog.
Yeah, it's you're testing so many different things. It's flexibility, it's strength, it's endurance, but it's also like mental fortitude because you can get back up. Very rarely are we going to get you to the point of complete physical exhaustion just off of burpees where you're having like muscular breakdown. But you can sure as shit test somebody's will and fortitude with them, like just falling down and standing back up. It's so simple, but it's so effective.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you one and I'm gonna give it the listeners one. If you really want to see what the hell you're made out of, 250 burpees for time. Send it. That will fucking put your dick clean in the mud.
What's your time on that? What was your best time you've
Not
ever?
good. Like I did it. I actually did it at home when I was visiting my parents this summer. And you know how that Michigan summer humidity
Yeah,
is. I
yeah.
did that thing at about 8 in the morning in the driveway with 100% humidity, and I knocked it out in like 27 and some change.
That's what I was thinking about. 30 minutes is what it would take.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I had a client that killed it in like 15. I'm like, how are you in better shape than me? This is not okay.
I've done 25 burpees in a minute at like a fast pace.
Mm,
There's no way I could sustain that for 10 minutes. There's
bro.
no way.
No, yeah, it'll make you want to give back something you didn't even steal, that's for sure. All right, dude, listen, coming to an end here. I want to be respectful of your time. I do have maybe one or two more things though. I think I already know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask anyways. How do you guys deal with getting shadow banned?
Yeah, it's a tough thing, right? We have a lot of people that come into our community that help tell our story. So one of the things, if you ever head over to the Tactical Games Instagram or to our YouTube channel, we create, I think, incredible content. We do it fast and we do it constantly. People don't get to see it because we have firearms in it, right? Like you'll never find us on the explore page, but people share our content. People involved in our community love it and they want to see it advance and grow. So it's them. It's really the people in our sport, the people that come out and compete. They help us grow, and that's like one hand shaking the other. I love the fact that they're excited to do it, and we do our best to promote them as well and make sure people know who they are too.
Perfect, man. I want to go back because I always tell everybody I'm always looking for like what am I going to title this episode, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into this because I do have the title. You said a statement earlier, competition breeds excellence. That's huge, man. Dive a little bit deeper into that because I just absolutely love it. I've never heard that before. and I couldn't. I mean, it's nothing short of just the absolute truth.
Yeah, it's excellence can be perceived as like a podium spot, or it can be perceived as like, hey, I learned something from this competition that I'm going to take back to my unit, and then I'm going to apply in the training that we're doing as a unit that's going to make other people better. That constant chase for something better, knowing and understanding that we are limited in our current capacity, but our future capacity is based on the performance that we put in today. So what you take in from yesterday becomes what you do today, and then what you do today becomes what you are tomorrow. So like the idea that I am where I am right now, but I can change that based on the work that I put in tomorrow or today, and the things that I continue to do tomorrow, is what I think it's really about. Like you come out here with a bunch of people that have different backgrounds but similar experiences, maybe, and you learn from one another. Like if you've ever showed up, I'm sure your academy was the same way. You show up and there's people from all over the place, all different backgrounds, all different races, colors, creeds, ethnicities. It doesn't matter. They show up and they come after something, and they have these different experiences that have made them who they are, that they can share with one another, that creates a common good and like a common push forward. So it's really about pushing one another, learning from one another, taking those things in, being capable of receiving input, and then applying it, understanding like, hey, maybe this is bullshit, or hey, maybe this is nuanced, or hey, maybe this is freaking awesome, and I can take this back, and it'll change how my department, my unit's been doing things, or just how like you've been training personally. It could be for a hunt, right? It doesn't need to necessarily even be for something for a military unit or for a law enforcement department. I think that when you're around people that are trying to achieve greater things, it makes you want to try to achieve greater things. So that's really what it's about for me.
Well said, Nick. Absolutely nailed it. Where can people find you guys? What events do you have coming up? And I think this is going to interest a lot of my following. I think people have heard of you guys, but not maybe in the sense of knowing exactly what everything entails. I think you and I
Yeah.
both did a great job of explaining everything and the company and your background, which was amazing. So where can we find you? When
Yeah.
can we sign
So
up? How do we sign up? All that fun shit.
tacticalgames.com, thetacticalgames.com is a great way to see what our events are that are coming up, to understand about like our training opportunities, anything that we might have going. It's really like the catch-all for all of our information. Instagram, we're at the Tactical Games. Again, if you're just looking for cool stuff to get motivated, we have our Tactical Games Training Center that we just opened up here in Georgetown, Texas. So that's where I'm at right now. We've got our podcast studio, our office spaces, our retail center, and then our performance center as well, our gym. Um, we have community workouts here on Saturdays. We have online training. We have dry fire training. That's all through the website. YouTube's a great opportunity. You can go and see stage videos, so you get an idea of like, this is what a tactical games event looks like. And if there's ever any interest, I mean, like Facebook, of course, we're on all those platforms as well. But yeah, I would say any one of those are good ways to get a hold of us.
Hell yeah, man. Really appreciate it, brother. This was a lot of fun and very informative. It's cool hearing about the company, and you have a really cool background, man. So this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to hop on here.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it, man. I had a good time. And yeah, if you guys need anything, if you're ready to come out, let me know. We'll get you out there.
Boom. I appreciate it. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll cut it there, man. We'll small talk for a sec. Great job.